All right, let's get real. Ever notice how some people just love to test your boundaries? They interrupt. They make passive-aggressive comments. They act like your time and feelings are optional, and we're supposed to just smile and let it slide? Not today. If you're done putting up with people who don't respect you, this video is for you. Today, I'm breaking down brutally honest, maybe even a little controversial, ways to handle disrespect without losing your cool and without sacrificing your self-respect. This isn't about yelling. It's not about revenge. It's about owning your space and making sure no one ever doubts where your line is. So buckle up, because by the end of this video, you'll have every tool you need to deal with disrespect like a stoic, with clarity, confidence, and a spine of steel. Let's dive in. Number 1. Set fire to the false self they want you to be. Let me tell you something unpleasant, but necessary. Many of the people who disrespect you aren't responding to who you truly are. They're reacting to the role they think you're supposed to play in their little drama. They've assigned you a position, the pushover, the quiet one, the easy-to-manipulate background character, who never pushes back, who smiles when insulted, who bows when mocked. They didn't ask you, they just decided it. And here's the first truth. Nietzsche would want you to confront with iron in your spine and fire in your gut. If you allow yourself to be defined by others, you will forever be at the mercy of their contempt. Disrespect is often not about you. It's about control. A boss who cuts you off mid-sentence, a friend who jokes at your expense in front of others, a partner who constantly downplays your emotions. They are not necessarily strong. More often, they are cowards who found a convenient target. Someone they believe won't bite back. Someone predictable, containable. What they fear is your unpredictability, your refusal to play their game, your self-definition. So here is what you must do. Destroy the version of you that makes them comfortable in their disrespect. Burn it down with cold fire. If you are used to laughing off insults, stop. Let silence fall. Let the moment stretch. Make them look you in the eye and sit in the discomfort of your presence. Not rage, not whining. Presence, stillness. The kind that says, I saw that, and it changes things. You see, when you change the script, they don't know their lines anymore. And this is the first tactical advantage. It throws them off balance. The friend who used to tease you now feels your detachment. The boss senses your newfound clarity. The partner, unsure of your silence, feels the pressure to reevaluate their behavior. This is the power of stepping outside the role they cast you in. And that power is frighteningly effective. Nietzsche spoke often of the concept of becoming, not arriving, not pretending, but constantly forging the self through fire and confrontation. He said, "He who despises himself still respects himself as one who despises." Even in self-loathing there is some ownership, some last stand of sovereignty. But to passively allow disrespect is to abandon the battlefield entirely. You must instead become the one who cannot be categorized easily, who responds not out of habit, but out of principle. This does not mean screaming. This does not mean cutting off everyone who ever crossed a line. That is childish rebellion, not philosophical resolve. What I'm talking about is something far colder and more dangerous. It is the internal revolution of detaching from the need to be liked by those who disrespect you. That's the true beginning of power. Let's consider a man, we'll call him Daniel. At work, he's the agreeable one. Everyone dumps extra tasks on him. He nods, smiles, delivers. His boss barely acknowledges it. His coworkers laugh behind his back. One day Daniel stops. He begins to ask, what's the scope of this task? Before accepting anything. He no longer stays late just to be seen. When someone jokes about his always available nature, he doesn't laugh. He just looks, calm, still. And do you know what happens? Some people are uncomfortable, some are angry, but they no longer disrespect him, not so easily. The first principle of handling disrespect is this: refuse to accept the identity they hand you. In Stoicism, this mirrors the practice of prohaisis, the idea that your moral purpose, your power to choose your response, is the only thing truly under your control. You cannot always control the insult, but you can control the meaning you give it. and the boundaries you set after it lands. There's an inner violence required here, the kind that tears down the smiley mask you've worn just to avoid confrontation, the kind that says, no more, you will lose some people, that's good. Let the scaffolding of false relationships collapse. What's left standing, after the fire, will be real, and it will be yours. So let's summarize the first step, clearly. Kill the role they assigned you. Let the quiet fire of self-respect burn through their expectations. When they realize they cannot push you back into the mold, they will either step up or step out, and either outcome is liberation. This is the first way you handle those who don't respect you. You stop being someone who allows it. Number 2, withdraw your energy. Respect is a currency, not a charity. There is a simple truth that the weak never understand. Energy is not infinite. Your attention, your effort, your care. These things are forms of currency, and those who do not respect you are the ones who spend your currency freely, shamelessly, as if your time were theirs to waste, your patience theirs to test, your presence theirs to command. But here is what the Stoics knew, and what Nietzsche screamed with every drop of ink and blood, that the power of a man is not measured in how much he gives, but in how deliberately he withholds. If someone disrespects you repeatedly, the most radical act is not confrontation, it's absence. You withdraw, not out of weakness, not out of fear, but out of supreme self-respect. Imagine a man named Elias. Every week he shows up for a group of friends, always there, always generous. And yet they mock him when he leaves the room. They roll their eyes when he shares his ideas. They interrupt him, ignore him, and never ask how he's doing. He feels the sting of invisibility, the ache of being tolerated, not valued. For months he tries harder. He becomes more agreeable, more available, more accommodating. But the more he gives, the less they see him. That is the paradox of appeasement. The more you bend to be liked, the more they forget your spine exists. Then one day, Elias stops texting first. He doesn't show up to the next gathering. He declines the next favor. No explanations, no drama, just silence, space. And almost instantly, their energy shifts. The one they ignored has now become the one they wonder about. Not because they suddenly became decent people, but because absence creates a void, and in that void they feel the discomfort of what they no longer control. You see, when you withdraw your energy from people who disrespect you, you are reminding them, and more importantly, reminding yourself, that your presence is a gift, not a given. This is not passive aggression. This is strategic dignity. Marcus Aurelius in his Meditations wrote, "The best revenge is to be unlike him who performed the injury." That means you don't need to retaliate. You don't need to beg, chase, or prove. You simply become unavailable, like a mountain to the wind, present, but untouched. And Nietzsche, he would tell you that your will to power, your deepest, most sacred flame, is being siphoned by those who see you as fuel, not as fire. He'd ask you, why are you trading your gold for their gravel? Why are you letting the trivial disturb the eternal within you? He'd demand that you reclaim your solitude, not as an escape, but as a declaration of your own worth. Withdrawing your energy doesn't mean cutting people off in some melodramatic purge. It means rebalancing the scales. Ask yourself, where is my effort flowing, and what is it building? If your effort builds resentment, withdrawal is your revolution, and the beauty of this strategy is that it is entirely in your hands. You don't need permission. You don't need consensus. You simply choose. You don't respond to the message. You stop initiating the conversation. You invest that saved energy in your mind, your body, your craft. And here's the secret. When you stop giving to those who deplete you, you begin to rise. Quietly, steadily, gloriously. The person they took for granted is now ascending beyond their reach. There's an old Stoic idea that goes like this. You can't control the actions of others, only your response to them. But what they don't often add is that your response can be total removal, not in rage, but in peace. Not to punish them, but to preserve you. The weak pour water into cracked cups and wonder why they always feel empty. The wise seal the cracks or find better vessels. So let this be your inner vow. I will not chase the attention of those who won't even offer me the basic currency of respect. I will not explain my boundaries to people who only notice them when they are crossed, and I will not burn my fire to warm the hands of those who mock the flame. In a world that teaches you to beg for scraps of approval, be the one who walks away from the table and cooks his own feast in silence. That is the essence of self-respect. That is power, and that is how you make the disrespectful feel your absence more than they ever felt your presence. Withdraw your energy, not to teach them a lesson, but to remind yourself that you were never dependent on their validation in the first place. Number 3. Redraw the lines. Ruthlessly respect is not something you beg for, it is something you define. If someone repeatedly disrespects you, they are not confused, they are comfortable. And the reason they are comfortable is because you have not made the cost of disrespect high enough. You've allowed the lines to blur. You've made too many excuses, turned too many blind eyes, laughed off too many jokes, and told yourself, it's not worth making a scene. But here's the truth. Every time you let disrespect slide, you teach them how to treat you. You are not a victim of their behavior. You are a co-author of your own mistreatment. Epictetus said, you are not disturbed by events, but by your judgment of them. So if someone walks over your boundaries like a welcome mat, the Stoic doesn't just blame them, he looks inward. He asks, where did I make myself small? Where did I flinch instead of speak? Where did I let harmony become humiliation? To redraw the lines is to reclaim your territory, and you must do it ruthlessly. Not with rage, but with resolve. Let me give you a scene. You've got a friend, or a colleague, or a family member, someone who constantly makes you the butt of their jokes. At first it was subtle. A comment here, a little jab there, but over time, it became a pattern. They undermine you in front of others, they mock your ambitions, they call it just teasing, but you leave the conversation feeling smaller every time. Now most people will suppress that anger. They'll smile through the disrespect and convince themselves it's not a big deal. But that is how you become invisible to yourself. That is how you become a stranger in your own skin. What the Stoic does is this: he draws the line, in daylight, with clarity, and without apology. He says, I don't accept being spoken to like that, not with fury, but with finality. He names the behavior, states the boundary, and holds it. Now understand, when you set a boundary, especially after years of letting it slide, people will resist. They'll accuse you of being sensitive, dramatic, difficult, good. That resistance is the sound of the old version of you dying. It means the lines are working. In psychology, this is known as intermittent reinforcement. If someone disrespects you and gets away with it most of the time, but occasionally you snap, they learn that they can still push the line. Inconsistency teaches them persistence, but if you respond with calm, consistent enforcement, they either adapt or they vanish. Either outcome is a victory. Redrawing boundaries doesn't mean becoming cold or cruel. It means choosing your dignity over comfort. It means saying, this is where I end, and you begin. And it means being willing to lose people who benefit from your lack of self-respect. There is nothing noble in being endlessly tolerant of the intolerable. There is nothing wise in accommodating those who feed on your silence. Marcus Aurelius, the emperor philosopher, put it simply, if it is not right, do not do it. If it is not true, do not say it. And I would add, if it is not respectful, do not allow it. Let me be clear, this is not about becoming confrontational, it's about becoming congruent, about aligning your external reality with your internal worth. Every boundary you draw is a line of poetry written in the language of self-respect, and yes, it will feel unnatural at first. You may tremble when you speak the words, but courage is not the absence of fear, it is the decision to act in spite of it. And over time, each act of boundary setting becomes a vote for the person you are becoming. Strong, whole, untouchable. So if you're tired of being disrespected, don't just demand better from others, require better from yourself. Speak clearly, act firmly, and draw the line so boldly that even silence can't be misunderstood. Remember, the world doesn't give you what you deserve, it gives you what you tolerate. Number 4. Master the power of indifference. Let them talk, let them gossip, mock, ignore, belittle, dismiss. Let them misunderstand you. Because here's what most people never realize. Not everyone who disrespects you is trying to hurt you. Some are just small, spiritually, emotionally, intellectually, small. And when a small person feels threatened by your strength, they respond the only way they know how, by minimizing you, not to elevate themselves, but to prevent the mirror of your presence from revealing their inadequacy. So what do? You learn indifference, and not the fake fragile kind, where you pretend not to care, but stew in silence. No, I mean the fierce, unshakable kind, the stoic kind. Let me ask you this. Why do you flinch when they disrespect you? Why does your blood boil when they mock you behind your back? It's because on some level you still believe their words hold power. You still seek validation from people who are incapable of giving it. You still let their opinions rent space in your head, charging you in dignity what they never pay in respect. This is where you stop. This is where you learn what Marcus Aurelius meant when he said, "Choose not to be harmed, and you won't feel harmed." Don't feel harmed, and you haven't been. The disrespect of others is not your injury, it is their reflection. Imagine a man shouting insults at a mountain. Does the mountain shout back? Does it shrink, apologize, or explain itself? No, the mountain remains still, unbothered, indifferent. Now I'm not telling you to suppress your humanity or to numb yourself into apathy. That's not strength, that's denial. I'm telling you to reclaim your energy from things beneath you, from people who feed on reactions, from games that cannot be won without losing yourself. Let me paint you a scene. You're at work. A coworker constantly interrupts you in meetings, takes credit for your ideas, and jokes about how emotional or sensitive you are. You feel the burn in your chest, your throat, your pride. The old you wants to snap, to call them out in front of everyone, to win. But the stoic you, the sharpened, elevated you, understands a wolf does not bark at every dog that passes by. It doesn't need to. Its power is not in noise, but in presence. So instead you speak with calm clarity when necessary, and silence when it speaks louder. You document the truth. You take action not out of revenge, but precision. And you deny them what they want most, your attention. Because that is the lesson. Your attention is currency. Your energy is sacred, and when you give it to someone who feeds off your anger, you become complicit in your own disrespect. Nietzsche wrote, "He who fights with monsters should be careful lest he thereby become a monster." In other words, if you let their behavior mold your soul, you lose. But if you remain grounded, unmoved, you force them to reckon with their own pettiness, alone. This is indifference, not passivity, but elevation. You don't chase their approval, you don't grovel for understanding, you move like someone who has already made peace with the fact that not everyone will get you, and that's fine. They are not your judges, they are not your audience. You know your truth, you walk in it, and when someone disrespects you, you do not waste breath on their theater. You simply step out of the scene, not with rage, not with complaint, but with the quiet confidence of someone who refuses to kneel at the altar of smallness. There is an art to this, a strength that looks like stillness, a force that needs no explosion to be felt, because sometimes the most powerful thing you can say is nothing. Sometimes the deepest revenge is flourishing where they swore you would fail. Sometimes the ultimate victory is giving them nothing to feed on. So stop bleeding energy on people who don't even know what they're looking at. When they look at you, they don't need your anger, they need your absence. And you need your peace. Choose not to be harmed, choose not to be owned, choose the mountain. Number 5. Withdraw your approval. Disrespect doesn't survive in a vacuum. It needs oxygen, and the oxygen it breathes is your approval. You see, most people make one fatal mistake when dealing with those who disrespect them. They stay, they explain, they plead, they keep showing up, hoping that if they're just nicer, more understanding, more easygoing, the other person will finally come around. They won't. You cannot teach someone to respect you by tolerating their disrespect. Let me say that again. You cannot teach someone to respect you by tolerating their disrespect. And so, the fifth way to deal with people who don't respect you is this. Withdraw your approval, not in rage, not in guilt, not in bitterness, but in power. Because here's a truth that's going to sting. Every time you laugh at a joke that cuts you down, every time you keep a toxic friendship alive out of fear of being alone, every time you lower your standards to keep someone comfortable, you give them silent permission to keep disrespecting you. You're training them, and they're learning, but you can untrain them, not by trying to fix them, not by trying to earn their respect, by walking away from the table they keep poisoning. Ask yourself, what would you think of a person who constantly returns to a well that makes them sick? Would you call them brave, loyal, forgiving? No, you would call them lost. This is what Nietzsche meant when he warned us about the dangers of slave morality, the mentality of the person who believes that suffering is virtue, that turning the other cheek will convert the wolf into a lamb. But wolves don't become lambs, they just bite softer until you stop flinching. Stop romanticizing your own neglect. There's a story, not of a man or a woman, but of a soul who kept giving time, energy, attention, patience, to people who offered nothing but coldness in return. They kept hoping their love would redeem them, that their loyalty would inspire a change, that if they just held on long enough, something sacred would blossom. But all that grew was resentment, and it grew in them. And one day, they woke up empty, not because others drained them, but because they let themselves be drained. This is the point of no return, and it is the beginning of power. Because when you finally withdraw your approval, when you stop feeding the hand that slaps you, something changes. Not in them, in you. You realize you never needed their validation, you just forgot how to validate yourself. You realize respect isn't something you get, it's something you claim, not by fighting for it, but by refusing to stay where it doesn't live. So what does this look like? It looks like silence after the 10th joke that wasn't funny. It looks like turning down the invitation, not out of spite, but clarity. It looks like ending the conversation when the tone turns condescending. It looks like no longer offering explanations to someone who twists every word. It looks like detachment, not from them, but from the fantasy that they'll ever become who you hoped. Psychologically, this is known as boundary enforcement, and it's not cruelty, it's sanity. The Stoics understood this well. Epictetus said, "It is impossible for a man to learn what he thinks he already knows." And people who chronically disrespect you, they already believe they know your worth. They've measured you, filed you away, and assume you'll never change. Prove them wrong, with distance. You do not owe eternal access to people just because they were once close. Proximity is not privilege, and loyalty is not a leash. Some people treat you poorly because they assume you'll never leave, because you never have, until now. Withdrawing your approval is not the same as hate. It's not revenge. It's not even cold. It's the warmth of finally standing in your own light, without begging others to recognize it. Nietzsche said, "The higher we soar, the smaller we appear to those who cannot fly. So fly, and let them misunderstand your silence as arrogance. Let them call your distance selfish. Let them say, 'You've changed.' Good, you have. You've stopped feeding what hurts you. You've stopped explaining your worth to people committed to ignoring it. You've stopped offering loyalty to people who treat your presence like an afterthought. There is no virtue in staying small to keep others comfortable. Withdraw your approval. Withdraw your time. Withdraw your energy, and watch how quickly the mask of indifference falls off the ones who claimed your respect never mattered. In the end, you will not be remembered for who you pleased. You will be remembered for what you tolerated. And when they tell the story of your life, let it be known, you walked away, not because you didn't care, but because you finally did. Number 6, become unignorable. Some people will never respect you until they can't afford not to. And that's not fair, but it is real. Respect in this world is not always given to the kind, the patient, or the quietly noble. It is often reserved for the powerful, the focused, the ones who rise so far above pettiness, mockery, and belittlement that ignoring them becomes a form of self-sabotage. And so the sixth and final way to deal with people who don't respect you is to become unignorable. You don't argue, you don't plead, you build, you refine, you become so damn disciplined, so relentlessly committed to your own evolution, that their opinion can't even breathe in your atmosphere. Ask yourself this: when was the last time you heard a lion explaining itself to a sheep? You didn't, because it doesn't. Greatness is loud in silence. There's a scene, maybe from your life, of someone being mocked, disrespected, underestimated. A boss rolls their eyes at your ideas, a partner dismisses your needs, a friend interrupts you mid-sentence again, and something inside you starts to rot. You begin to question yourself, you feel small, you want to prove yourself. But listen closely, you don't need to prove anything to them, you need to become something they can no longer dismiss. This is not about revenge, it's not about making them jealous, it's about reclaiming your center. Nietzsche wrote, "The individual has always had to struggle to keep from being overwhelmed by the tribe." He knew, the herd, the collective, the average, wants you to stay small, predictable, manageable. The moment you grow, you threaten their comfort. The moment you rise, you expose their stagnation, so they mock, they minimize, they disrespect. But the only answer to disrespect is dominance of self, not of others, of yourself. Dominate your habits, your addictions, your distractions. Every moment you waste reacting to disrespect is a moment stolen from your rise. Take it back. Work like someone who's been doubted. Train like someone they left for dead. Speak like someone who's bled for every word. You don't demand their respect. You outgrow their relevance. There's a story about a man, not famous, not wealthy, not even noticed, but every morning before the world woke up, he trained, he studied, he created, he healed, quietly, with discipline, with rage disguised as purpose. The same people who laughed at him in year 1 were asking for advice by year 5, not because he changed who he was, but because he refused to stay where they left him. This is what becoming unignorable looks like. Imagine walking into a room where every person once doubted you, and suddenly, they fall silent. Not because you yell, but because your presence speaks louder than their noise. That is earned silence. That is the music of becoming. In psychology, this transformation is rooted in the principle of self-efficacy, your belief in your own ability to succeed. When you strengthen that, the opinions of others fade into background static. In Stoicism, Marcus Aurelius reminds us, waste no more time arguing about what a good man should be. Be one. You don't post about your progress, you become your progress. You don't announce your standards, you live them. You don't demand respect, you radiate it, so clearly that those who lack it feel unworthy to approach. Here's the truth. Some people only understand power, not cruelty, not arrogance. Power, quiet, stable, radiant self-possession. So give it to them, not for revenge, but because it's who you were meant to be all along. Become so sharp, they cut themselves trying to touch you. So disciplined that mediocrity feels embarrassed around you. So sure of yourself that disrespect slides off you like water off obsidian. There's a Nietzsche quote, "They never print on posters. He who cannot command himself should obey." This is your moment, your rebirth. You are not here to convince anyone of your worth. You are here to make such undeniable progress that their disrespect becomes laughably outdated. Be the person who disappeared for 6 months and returned unrecognizable, not because you got lucky, but because you decided. The final way to handle people who don't respect you is to become someone who doesn't need their respect at all. You become the storm they dismissed as a breeze, the mountain they laughed at before the climb, the fire they said would flicker out, until it burned down the whole forest of their doubt. In the end, you don't need them to say, "I was wrong about you." You just need to become someone so powerful that their opinion dies quietly in the shadow of your success. So now you know the truth. Respect isn't something you wait for. It's not something you beg for, and it's definitely not something you chase in people who are too blind, too bitter, or too broken to give it. You command it. Not through arrogance, but through alignment. 6 ways, 6 weapons, and none of them require you to scream, insult, or lower yourself to their level. You set boundaries with silence. You choose restraint over reaction. You focus on building yourself rather than fixing them. You master your time, your habits, and your presence. You become the kind of person who radiates self-respect so powerfully that the world has no choice but to adjust. That's the Stoic way. That's the Nietzschean fire, and that's your path now. But don't walk it alone. If this video hit something inside you, if it made you pause, breathe deeper, or remember who the hell you are, then don't just scroll on, own the moment. Subscribe to the channel, not just because it helps us, but because it keeps you connected to the mindset that refuses to settle. Like this video. If you're done tolerating people who treat you like an afterthought, comment below with which of the 6 ways you need it most right now, or share your own experience. Every story sharpens the sword, and share this with someone who's been questioning their worth, someone who's forgotten their strength. Be the person who wakes them up, because this isn't just a video, it's a reminder that your dignity is not up for debate, that you were never meant to be small, and that the greatest revenge against disrespect is becoming everything they said you couldn't be. So go, and make them regret the day they underestimated you.